Alrighty, so folks, here I'm simply reading the text, pages 245 to 248 in the spotlight, the liberation of Europe. While forces were landing on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, other Allied forces invaded Europe from the south through Italy and France. Hitler struck back by unleashing his secret weapons, the flying bomb V1 and the even deadlier V2 at war-tired Britain. These missiles were aimed at British cities, but as the Allied invading forces swept through Belgium, they overran the rocket launching sites. Fighting continued for another 11 months after the landings at Normandy. Canadian forces continued to press forward in Italy and Western Europe. Some of the toughest fighting for our soldiers, though, came at the end of the war. We lost about 1,000 men each month towards the ending of the war. Canadian units had to clear German forces from the Channel ports. These included Dieppe, where Canadians paraded in victory, were the townspeople who had seen them slaughtered 2 years before. As the Nazis retreated from Holland, they flooded the lowlands. Canadian troops pushed the Nazis out from the towns of the Netherlands, but we suffered 7,600 casualties, that's dead and wounded. But on the 5th of May, Germany surrendered. Until the Allies could bring in food and supplies, though, some Dutch people had nothing to eat but tulip bulbs. Holland was liberated, though, and Canadian forces turned to feeding a starving population. The Dutch had much gratitude. One soldier reported, "The people ransacked their gardens so that the rain of flowers which falls on our vehicles is endless." As Allied armies pressed toward Germany, Hitler called upon his soldiers to fight even more fiercely. He warned that whoever gave up a centimeter of German territory, just a centimeter, while still alive, was a traitor. In a last desperate move, Hitler ordered his reserves and 3,000 tanks against us in Western Europe. But eventually, the Allies and us, we broke through. Meanwhile, the Russians were advancing on Berlin from the east, so Hitler's stuck in the middle. Although the Germans resisted fiercely, they couldn't hold back the attack. By April 1945, Soviet troops were in Berlin. By May 8, 1945, the fighting was over. Hitler had learned that his Italian ally Mussolini had been killed and captured. On the 30th of April, 1945, Hitler had himself shot. His body was burned. On May the 7th, Nazi Germany ceased to exist. It was Victory in Europe Day. The long struggle in Europe was over. Millions of people, though, did not live long enough to see peacetime. One of them was a little Jewish girl, Anne Frank. She had spent much of the war hiding from the Nazis. In August 1944, she was caught. She died in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, just a month before the camp was liberated by Canadian soldiers. Now, a little bit on the Holocaust. As they moved into German-held territory in Europe, Allied armies had been making horrifying discoveries. They came across the concentration camps. The Nazis had set up these camps. Most of the prisoners there were because they were Jewish. Others were political prisoners who had dared to speak out against the Nazis. In 1942, the Nazis had devised one of the most horrific plans in all of human history. They had decided that every Jewish man, woman, and child would be transported to one of these camps and killed. Hitler called this the final solution. Dachau and Bergen-Belsen were typical of these kinds of camps. Here all the prisoners were put to work for the German war effort. At least 5 million slaves were working in these camps. In some places, medical experiments were carried out on helpless people. It was awful. At places like Treblinka, Sobibor, and Majdanek in Poland, hanging, shooting, torturing, all of this stuff went on. And there were gas chambers to kill people in large numbers. The bodies were then removed by a special dispatchment of other prisoners. Gold fillings from the teeth of the victims were melted down and made into gold bars. Other valuables like watches, bracelets, rings were put in German bank accounts. Then the bodies were placed in ovens for cremation. Some of the most moving stories of bravery and heroism have come out of these death camps, and there's a couple of stories here, but we're going to wrap it up on the last page. Before the war ended, orders went out from Berlin to destroy the camps, to keep them secret. But time ran out as Russian, British, Canadian, American forces overran the camps. The first battle-hardened soldiers who entered these death factories often broke down and cried. One soldier turned his machine gun on the camp guards. If Canadian troops had ever doubted whether the war was worth fighting, the Nazi death camps made it clear that the fight, though tragic, was just and proper. The Allies decided that parts of some of these camps would be preserved. They would be a permanent reminder of this Holocaust. And they are still maintained to this day as museums, as a remembrance of what happened.